They thought America would be a wasteland, a country exhausted by war, rationing, and death. After all, Europe was in ruins. Every city had craters where homes once stood. So when a train full of captured German soldiers rolled across the American countryside, they pressed their faces to the windows and froze. They saw shining towns, children playing in the streets, supermarkets overflowing with food, miles and miles of factories, all still running. One of them whispered, "If this is how America looks during war, how could we ever hope to win?" This is the story of the German prisoners of war who came to the United States and saw for the first time what true industrial power looked like. By early 1945, the Third Reich was dying. Allied bombers filled the skies. Cities like Dresden, Hamburg, and Berlin were piles of ash. The once unstoppable Wehrmacht was retreating on every front. Soldiers were starving, out of ammunition, and surrounded by enemies closing in from east and west. For millions of Germans, capture was inevitable. But there was one question every soldier asked himself: who will capture me? Because surrendering to the Soviets often meant death or years of suffering in Siberia. But surrendering to the Americans, that was considered survival. So when the U.S. Army began shipping thousands of German POWs across the Atlantic, most of them didn't know what to expect. Only that they were lucky to be alive. For many of these men, it was their first time seeing the ocean, let alone crossing it. They boarded massive Liberty ships under tight guard. As they stood on deck, staring at the endless Atlantic waves, some wondered if they were being sent to some secret prison island, or maybe to forced labor camps in the desert. But the reality awaiting them was far stranger. When the ships approached the American coast, New York, Boston, Norfolk, the prisoners couldn't believe their eyes. They saw a skyline untouched by bombs, harbors full of new ships, cranes, trucks, and fuel tanks. The docks were alive with workers, men and women, laughing, shouting orders, moving supplies. It was like stepping into another world. One POW later wrote in his journal, "We had been told that the Allies suffered too, that their cities were ruined. But as I looked at New York, I saw no ruins, only power, motion, and confidence." The Germans were loaded onto trains and sent deep into the American heartland. They passed through fields larger than entire towns back in Europe. They saw cars everywhere, not military trucks, but civilians driving to work, to school, to theaters. They saw billboards for Coca-Cola and Camel cigarettes, neon signs glowing even in small towns. They smelled food, fresh bread, meat, coffee. One soldier reportedly asked his guard, "Are we sure we lost the war? Because it looks like you never even fought one." That was the first cultural shock. The second came when they arrived at the POW camps. By 1945, there were more than 400,000 German POWs in America. The U.S. had built over 700 camps across nearly every state. Some were massive, like Camp Hearn in Texas. Others were small satellite camps near farms or factories. The rules of the Geneva Convention were followed strictly. Prisoners received food, sometimes better than what American civilians had. They got medical care, showers, mail from home, and even education. In many camps, the Americans encouraged the prisoners to form bands, choirs, and even newspapers. They were allowed to debate, attend lectures about democracy, and, most surprisingly, work. They picked cotton, harvested wheat, chopped wood, and built roads. In return, they were paid a few cents a day in camp scrip. To the Germans, it was unreal. They had been taught that the Americans were greedy capitalists, selfish, decadent, chaotic. But the America they saw was disciplined, clean, organized, and unbelievably rich. Then came the moment that truly changed them. Some prisoners were assigned to work near American factories: Ford, General Motors, Boeing. Others helped on farms that had tractors, irrigation systems, and machines they had never seen before. They saw endless assembly lines, workers turning raw steel into trucks, tanks, planes. In one camp near Michigan, German officers were allowed to visit a local automobile plant. When they entered, the noise, the energy, the scale, it was overwhelming. A single factory could produce more vehicles in a month than all of Germany could in a year. One officer later confessed, "We had the best engineers in the world, but America had an army of engineers. We built one Tiger tank. They built 50 Shermans. They saw women welding, driving forklifts, building engines. They saw workers of every race working together. And the thought hit them, Germany never had a chance." In many towns, especially in the Midwest and South, locals began to interact with POWs. Farmers needed help, and they